Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the sleepy General Law Subcommittee this morning. We're going to do a couple things this morning. We're going to have a brief intro from our JLR team who did a considerable amount of work over the off-season, just touching on some of the highlights briefly. We're going to then take up Senator Reed's Bill 533 and then Senator Ruff's Senate Bill 942, and then deal with the 6 Senate bills relating to casinos. Senate Bill 942 has been requested to bid through to strike. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for having me. Thank you again for having me. I can feel the excitement in the room at this point when I come up to present. We don't have slides. I think everyone's got this pretty well memorized by now, and I'm going to keep this pretty brief. Again, this is going to be some of the high-level policy points. I'm happy to stop and take questions at any time. So I'll be moving pretty quick, but we probably have some more information on anything you're interested in. And we also have copies of our report here if anyone would like one or needs one as we go. So real quickly, talking about casino revenue projections. Total projected state revenue from casinos is $228 million annually. That accounts for the state gaming tax revenue, other state taxes, as well as the costs of administration and impacts of other types of gaming. We found that a resort-style casino is projected to be viable under a nationwide median 27% gaming revenue tax rate in all 5 cities from last year's legislation. As far as the economic impact goes, we found estimated 10,800 total jobs would be created by casinos, a majority of which would be employed directly at the facilities. Small, of course, of the statewide workforce, but bigger impact, up to 3% of the local workforce in those localities, with a median wage of $33,000 across those jobs. As far as how much state tax revenue is generated by different or by different tax rates. At a 12% rate, we project out $122 million annually of state revenue. At a higher 40% rate, we projected $378 million annually. So the next question is, what are some key considerations when setting that tax rate? States with fewer casinos, like Virginia would be under the proposed legislation, tend to have a higher rate, and that's to account for more competition. States with that limited number of licenses have a median tax rate of 33%. On the opposite side, states with an unlimited number of casino licenses and more competition have a median tax rate of 12% by gaming revenue. Another key concept there is that tax rates have a modest impact on the economic impact and the size and scale of the casino, but have a disproportionately larger impact on state revenue. For example, a tax rate that doubles state revenue is going to be projected to decrease casino employment by 8% and annual GDP contributions from casinos by 6%. On the other hand, each single point in gaming tax, each percentage higher, is projected to generate $10 million additional dollars of state revenue annually. However, not all the markets are the same, so we looked at which markets could benefit more from a lower tax rate. Smaller markets like Bristol and Danville are projected to see the largest marginal increase in casino size and scale and corresponding economic impact at a lower rate. This is because a lower rate gives them more profit to support a bigger property and more amenities, and this is important in those small markets because it's going to help them attract customers from further population centers about a 2-hour drive time away. I do want to emphasize that even in these smaller markets, that trade-off is relatively modest increase in economic impact compared to a larger negative impact to state revenue. On the other hand, larger localities could be built, a casino in larger localities could be built to a size to adequately serve their market even at a higher tax rate, and they are projected to do much more even at a lower rate. When deciding how to set a casino tax rate, some considerations could include a graduated rate that increases as revenue increases, and that way a casino in a smaller market could pay a tax structures regionally in order to try to compensate for some of those differences in market size. Before I get into this section, I saw Mr. Marks' article last night, so I know some of this, depending on where things are, could be a little stale, but these are the results of our reports. So I still want to put them out there and make sure the committee has it in front of them. The first question is, how should casino developments be selected? Nearly all states with a limited number of casino licenses use a competitive selection process to award those licenses. The reasons to do this are the same for any type of public procurement. Competition can help maximize the impact and minimize risk of a project. It also, in terms of maximizing risk, you can compare projects on wages, employment, projected capital investment. In terms of minimizing risks, it helps to ensure proposals are made by experienced and qualified operators and that there are a financially sound and viable project. Next question is, should the state have a lead role in the development selection process? We did find that the state typically does take this lead role, and the state-led process can help ensure that there's the consistent use of key elements of a competitive process, that adequate expertise is available to make a selection, can offer a more independent and objective perspective that is removed from individual local interests, and the selected operators will be able to comply with the state regulatory requirements. Who should be involved in the selection process is another offshoot of that question. Other states often will use their gaming oversight board or a separately appointed casino selection committee to ultimately make selections. Dedicated committee has some advantages because they can specialize in that area and it doesn't detract from the gaming board's regulatory focus. Another key element I do really want to emphasize is that states often use expert consultants hired by the state to independently verify the feasibility of casino proposals. This additional due diligence helps ensure that proposals are realistic, viable, and sustainable in the long run. States will incorporate local input in that process, and that can be done by locality-specific criteria in the RFP or local representation on the state selection committee. Another important question is whether any category of applicant should be given a preference for a casino license. As you know, SB 1126 from last year authorized commercial casino gaming in Richmond and Norfolk under the condition that such gaming is conducted by the Pamunkey tribe. There is precedent for such preferences in casino selection in other states and for other types of procurement in Virginia. As a result, our report includes an option that the General Assembly could require that a selection process include a preference, examples of which could be for tribal or local ownership. However, we do want to emphasize that if this kind of preference is established, in order to avoid undermining the merits of the competitive process, that preference criteria should be set at a level as to not outweigh any of the other criteria. Another topic to briefly touch on is how a voter referendum could be used to authorize gaming in a locality. I think our concern there is that a voter referendum should not act as a de facto award of a license, because that would be inconsistent with any kind of competitive process. What I mean by this is the voter referendum language and statute from last year's legislation could be interpreted to require naming both the locality and a specific location of the casino. If the referendum occurs before the license is awarded, and if that parcel listed on the referendum is privately owned, the owner of that land essentially now has the only land authorized for casino gaming. For other types of gaming, such as pari-mutuel wagering, the referendum is a simple yes/no on the type of gaming and not location specific. Finally, there's this question of whether the state should levy a fee for a casino operator license, and if so, how much. Most states do assess a fee because it's a valuable commodity that's controlled and awarded by the state. Using the fees from other states as a benchmark, that would put fees for Virginia casinos at between $15 million and $33 million each for a 15-year license. Next, about overseeing and regulating casinos. The first question is which agency should do so. We found Virginia Lottery is the only existing state agency that could realistically expand to oversee casino gaming. We found that a standalone gaming agency could offer specialized and focused oversight, but would require more startup time and resources. Lottery is expected to have some economies of scale due to existing administrative and executive staffing. It would save about 25 staff and $2 million per year under our estimates. Regardless, it's going to be a pretty resource-intensive new initiative for the state. Even at Lottery, it's estimated to be 96 additional employees at a cost of $17 million per year. There's this question of who in the casino industry should be licensed. States typically require extensive background and financial investigations of key executives prior to receiving a license to own or operate a casino. States also require background checks and licensing of gaming employees and gaming equipment suppliers. They sometimes require this of non-gaming employees and non-gaming vendors. Generally, that's done by either oversight agency staff and or in tandem with the state police. One other thing that we wanted to touch on today is just to give some thought from meetings last week and now the casino meeting. There are several additional forms of gaming being contemplated right now by Virginia, all of which look like they could fall under lottery. That would potentially be a lot of things coming in the door at lottery at the same time. So there may be some kind of consideration, either sequencing or timing of how all this goes, just to avoid. We're not saying it's a bad idea to put them all at lottery, but just be conscious of it. It could create a pretty rapid agency expansion if everything goes through all at once. I have some stuff on the impacts of existing forms of gaming. I won't run through it unless there's specific questions. Happy to take anything.
Great, thank you for the presentation and the entire JLR team on its work this year. Questions from the committee? Working this morning. Thank you very much for the thorough presentation.
Wise choice by the first. Thank you.
All right, we're going to shift to Senator Reeves, Senate Bill 533. Senator Reeves.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I have Senate Bill 533. If I could ask one of my witnesses. Many of you know we've had horse racing revived in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We set up certain parameters for that. One of my biggest concerns, many of you know me personally and know where I stand on gaming, is to make sure that we set up a fund that would help those who are wind up being victims of gambling and there go probably find themselves in some dire straits. So what this bill does is it sets up a separate code section, and it sets up the problem gambling treatment and support fund. And that fund would be used to help with compulsive disorders with regard to gambling. The other thing that this bill does, and it's a pretty simple bill, is it works on breakage. I'm pretty sure most of you by now understand what breakage is and how that works, so I won't go into the details on that. But currently, we take a certain percentage of that breakage and we allocate that over to the Racing Benevolent Fund. And when that bill was passed in 2001, Colonial Downs was falling into some disrepair, and they were trying to get their track up and some other things. But at this point, they've been pretty profitable. And what we're trying to do, they're making quite a bit of money. We'd like to take a little bit more of that money and put it into the problem gambling treatment and support fund. And I have Mr. Tad Berman here, who's probably one of the foremost authorities with regard to parimutuel betting and horse racing. I would say in the state, he has no vested interest in any of this stuff other than make sure we do it right, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, Senator Reeves.
Well, as Senator Reeves says, the breakage has been used for years by the racetrack. It is money that comes out of the players' pockets. It's left over after the bets are divided up. Might be your wager might pay $6.48. You get $6.40 of those cents go into a breakage pool that eventually is used by default by the racetrack. That money, I would like to see it be used to benefit the players in a more beneficial way, and that would be to fund problem gaming prevention and support program. I've already had reports from some of the folks that have run into problems at Rosie's and Colonial Downs where they've gotten caught up in the whole gambling thing. And right now we need that fund to be up and running. One thing about the fund is this will establish and provide seed money for this fund. And as the other casino and sportsbook operations come online, they will also be able to provide money to continue to fund this program and grow it as gambling opportunities or more licenses are issued in the state. Is there any questions that I can answer you guys?
Questions from the committee?
Yes.
Senator Evans.
And this may be for you or for Senator Reeves. How big a problem do you think, is there any estimate of how big a problem this problem gambling is at the track or otherwise? I'm sorry, what is these other places?
The JLARC study said between 1.5% and 2% of the people that participate will develop some kind of gambling disorders. So,
And if I could follow up,
Senator Evans?
how many of that 1.5 to 2% doing this problem gambling fund being ramped up benefit?
I couldn't understand.
Of the 1.5 to 2% that are having a problem, how many would the fund benefit?
Well, that's
It's
that
good.
yet to be seen. Then you'd have to ask the Department of Behavioral Health and Rehabilitative Services that question. But I can tell you that, like I say, I've already had reports of people that have one boy that went over there, won some money, got caught up in it. He gambled back all the money he had won, plus another $50,000. He lost his house, he lost his job, etc. And he could have benefited from this fund, like so many others will be able to in the future. So.
Follow-up question?
Just to make a comment, Mr. Chairman, I'm all for addressing problem gambling. I'm just not sure that people who have a problem are gonna call a hotline before they have the problem or even in the middle of the problem. That's just a thought.
Follow-up, other questions, Senator Higgins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question if you knew any more specifics about how that money would be distributed to the localities, specifically for behavioral health. Does it go to the cities where the casinos actually exist? And then where does it go from there? I just, as a healthcare provider, I haven't seen a lot of resources out there, at least in the Hampton Roads area, for gambling support. So I was just wondering if you had any specifics about that.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, if you look at the actual bill, if you look at lines 80 through 85, we're promulgating the regulations to allow them to do that. So it says providing counseling and other support services for compulsive and problem gamblers, developing and implementing problem gambling treatment and prevention programs like Gamblers Anonymous, they're out there, and providing grants to supporting organizations. So I'm under the assumption that under this program, as we set up this fund, the state treasurer and the comptroller signed by the gaming commissioner would help authorize and approve those to help those get those funds out to the much needed folks that need that information.
Any follow-up questions?
So would it, again, just be more, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, so would it, again, just be more focused on the localities where the casinos exist?
I would think you would have an input, and I would think that's where you would want it. If that's where the main facilities are gonna be, people are gonna gravitate to those places to play, so I would think they would have systems set up to help do that. I mean, if you've ever been to Vegas, you see billboard signs and public information out there. Are you a problem gambler? All that sort of stuff, and numbers to call and those sort of things. So, if I could I ask, this might be tough for him, but I'd like Mr. Berman to tell you about a situation why I kind of got involved in this, problem gambling, what it led to, if you don't mind talking about it.
At the July 2018 meeting of the Virginia Racing Commission, National Council of Problem Gambling came and talked about this kind of fund. It struck a chord with me because 3 years previously, I had a friend of mine that lived out in the West End. His wife went to Maryland Live and began to take trips to Maryland Live on a regular basis. He thought she was just going up there and having a little fun. He was a pretty wealthy guy. He went to the bank one day to withdraw some money, and there was no money in his account. And he went home and, like anybody would, he asked his wife what had been happening and where his money was. And she was unable to cope with the situation. And 2 days later, she took his 45 and shot himself in the head. That's the kind of problems we have. That's why this is important. The money that I'm asking for, $400,000, it comes out of the players' pockets. And it's just a small fraction. Colonial was on board to gross between $200 and $250 million in gross profit this year. This $400,000 is just a drop in the bucket. So I'm hoping that we can go ahead and allocate this money to this problem gaming fund and be able to help people. That's the kind of issues that we're going to have. I think I even read where a former member of the legislature, he had gotten involved in some of this, and there was an article recently where his grandmother had been indicted or arrested because they had embezzled some money or something to that effect, and he had gotten himself in some trouble. So it just shows you it can affect anybody. And
Senator Reeves,
Yeah.
quick thing, you're aware that we have a number of vehicles that we've passed that do establish a problem gambling treatment fund in other vehicles. Are you aware of we have a
I
number
am,
of vehicles that?
Mr. Chairman, I would resist rolling mine into any of those till we know exactly what's going to go through that. So I'd like to stand alone.
Um, Senator Reeves, the second part of your bill sort of deals with the breakage issue that I'm not sure we have the full visibility or insight to. What I would like to do, Senator Boyce, do you have a follow-up question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not as much a question as just a commitment that this is a really important issue and that I think you've got the will of this committee that whatever we end up passing forward is gonna have that component. This is essential.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Bowe?
just a quick comment. Separately, I have a budget amendment for a grant for treatment for addiction with McShin Foundation. And frankly, while it was more towards substance type addiction, this certainly would fall into the type of addictions that they provide treatment for. One thing I would, as a friendly amendment, Senator Reeves, I would suggest is in my bill, I've got some staffing at the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. I would consider adding some sort of a connection to the organizations they provide grants to, so we make sure that they're vetting and going to organizations that have higher levels of success and can provide quality treatment. And I think that would help to satisfy Senator Kiggins' concerns to make sure that we have a network out there where we can get folks into appropriate level of treatment.
What's your number? I remember reading.
It's a budget amendment. It's 320, number 17, item 320, number 17.
Okay. Those in support of the bill? Please come up. Corey, you just want to give a thumbs up?
No, opposition.
All right. All right, Senator Reeves in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Frank Petromalo. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association, the HBPA. That's a nonprofit organization that represents the horsemen who race at Colonial Downs. Let me quickly say that we wholeheartedly support programs to deal with problem gaming. That's not why we're in opposition. What you have to appreciate is what Senator Reeves' bill does. Currently, by statute, the breakage, the odd cents, is broken up. 70% goes to Colonial Downs for capital improvements. 30% comes to my organization to conduct benevolent programs on the backside. Let me tell you a little about the backside of the racetrack. Most people here have never been there. There are 15 barns with stalls for 1,000 horses. We've got 6 dormitories, 2 bathhouses, a cafeteria, and our building. What we do, and at any given time, there are probably 300 to 400 men and women working there. It's a 7-day work week. Horses have to be taken care of 7 days a week. And those workers, for the most part, are low paid. We provide a benevolence program, which is approved by the Racing Commission. Every year we get our 30%. This year, for example, it was, I think, $67,000. The total amount of breakage, by the way, this year was $225,000. Like this year, I mean 2019. We spent that money on benevolence programs that we've been running for 20 years. Now that includes a chaplain who provides counseling. It includes medical and dental care that we provide for the backstretch workers. It provides meal tickets for those who need it to be redeemed in the cafeteria. We run training programs. We rent a 9-person van to transport people around to the Kmart, the food stores, etc. We put on a full-fledged social services program during the race. And the only source of funding that we have is from the breakage. Now, our opposition to Senator Reeves' bill is that he takes our 30%, lops off 10%, and sends it along with the 70% that used to go to Colonial Downs to a new fund. That's why we're opposed to the bill. I think dollar-wise, there's more benefit to be gained by allowing us to run our backstretch program, which, by the way, over the years that I've been involved, in the last 20 years, has involved alcohol and drug abuse that we've dealt with. And candidly, we've never had a gaming problem, although I'm sure they exist. But we want to continue running our program.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Mason.
So the gentleman just answered a question, and I was wondering about how much money we're talking about, and it's $225,000. So, you know, Senator Reeves, I think you're on to something very, very, very important, but I don't think $180,000 is enough. I mean, so I see the way you've structured it, 180 to the capital projects around, in and around the track, 67 to work in back office. You know, seems to be a number that's meaningful. I think we need a lot more money for what you're doing, so I very much appreciate your direction, but not completely certain that this is the way to do it.
Senator Reeves, you want to close out?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to respond, and I'd actually like Pat to respond, because he knows more about it. I've been to the track a couple of times, but I think he could probably give you a better description of kind of where that money goes. If you want to.
The first thing I would say is, in the code, it says, the 30% that goes to the breakage should be used for gambling, addiction, and substance abuse counseling, recreational education, and other related programs. In 19 years since this bill was passed, not one single year has the HPPA, the horsemen, allocated a single penny or used that, address that in any way. That was one of their responsibilities. So we're gonna let them off the hook on that. We're gonna create a fund to take care of that. As far as the money, the way it's spent, Mr. Petramalo gives you some good examples of some of the ways the money is spent, but at the same time, in the 18 years this bill has been in existence, I've found 20 other things that are capital expenditures or otherwise should have been paid by the horsemen, money from the horsemen, but have nothing to do with benevolence. And I'm going to tell you some of these things. Fertilizer for the racetrack, seed for the racetrack, pesticide, $40,000 for landscaping, gutters for the barns, 8 misting fans, contract labor for the HPPA for $10,000, a track base inspection, ventilators for the receiving farm,
Mr. Chairman.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've got 20 examples.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I take the point. I mean, I think we should make sure that they apply some of the money. But $67,000, and they used every penny of it to go to what you're trying to promote, is not enough, right? So I'm very sympathetic, and I think you're on to something right, but I think we need way more money than you've allocated here by either completely taking the capital expenditure or taking the 10% off.
Well, you're exactly right. And like I said, this fund will seed the problem gaming convention support program. You've got to start somewhere. It's not enough money to cover what J. Lark says they need. They say they need between $2 and $6 million. We'll make a $400,000 contribution there.
I don't mean to
It'll increase, yes.
cut you off. We have still a significant amount to work through this morning. I think you've made your case and point. Senator Reeves, Senate Finance is going to be dealing with the total holistic number of vehicles in regards to problem gaming to ensure that there are sufficient funds across the, 3 or 4 different vehicles that we're dealing with within the body. It'd be my recommendation that you brought up some I think, valid points from the committee and recommend that we continue this work in committee to review the allocation, understanding that the problem treatment fund is going to be established in code, and I appreciate your work to it. So the committee operates by motion. Continue.
Continue with 1.
Second. Second.
Move to continue 2021. Motion second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And aye by proxy. The bill is continued. Thank you for your advocacy, sir. This is something that we're going to be picking up within the total framework of funding. I think you covered the base issues, which I think you covered, but also there's a second question
609, and I actually have a couple of amendments that I'm not going to offer. I appreciate the courtesy of Mr. Chairman talking to me in advance. Those of you that have worked with me know I'm a pragmatist, and I have a vision as to where we're probably going on this. So I'll make a recommendation to you again. 609, what that bill does is it actually follows the JLARC recommendation. You've heard the opening view of it. There are approximately 18 recommendations in the JLARC report. 609 incorporates 16 of those. The two JLARC recommendations that were not included was additional training should the lottery board expand its governing authority and did not put the training provision in there. And secondly, the 18th recommendation dealt with trade machines, which is not the subject of what we're talking about today. Separate legislation pending on that. So 16 of the 18 recommendations JLARC included. And I'm going to spare you the agony of going through each of those 16. I'm going to respectfully ask, out of pragmatism, that you roll my bill into Senator Lucas's bill. This was the co-chief patron. Having said that, there are ongoing issues that I hope I, in my own sophomore and inconspicuous way, will participate in. That would be the taxation issues, the appropriate level of taxation, the appropriate amount of money that will be returned to localities for providing enhanced public services as a result of the presence of casino gaming, and possibly even some discussions about locations and joint initiatives together. But with that, I will spare you the agony of recognizing that the locomotive is going.
Thank you, Senator Norman. Before we take your recommended action, I'd like to ask Senator McClellan if you would also like to roll your Senate Bill 1083 into Senator Lucas's bill, Senate Bill 36. Okay, thank you. And I think you have a concept that was different that is now rolled into a substitute that's going to be for the committee. Is that correct? So the motion would be to, okay, Senator Killians. So the motion would be to roll in Senate Bills 1083, 743, 609, 374, 102 into Senate Bill 36, listing all those patrons as chief co-patrons. Move a second. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. All right, with that, we'll take up Senate Bill 36 now. Senator Lucas. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'd like to again apologize for my scratchy voice, but as you know, I've been sitting between Senator Barker and Senator Sassoff, and there was no way I was going to survive it. So I'm just going to deal with it. You know, I have talking points like we normally do when we come before these committees with issues that are of significance and importance to us. But I want to start in a very different way, and I want to put this in perspective. I was elected in 1991, and there were 15 members of my class. Included in that class, there are two others other than myself, Senator Norman and Senator Janet Howell. And over the years, as I look back over the legislation that we participated in together, there have been three major pieces of legislation that I've always wanted passed because what I thought it would do to help the city, the home of my birth, Portsmouth. As you know, Portsmouth is a distressed city. And so when I started working on casino legislation with then Delegate Gerald Jones and then Delegate Kenneth Nelson, both of whom now are circuit court judges, we're working on riverboat gaming. And after they either retired or moved on to other places, and some of the players who were there, some have died, some have retired, and others have moved on. Yet here I stand, fighting for casino legislation because of what I believe it would do to help my city, a distressed city, the city of Portsmouth. And now strapped with the burdensome tolls in Hampton Roads, even more now than ever do I need to get this bill passed? And so before I launch into my remarks further, I want to thank Senator Norman. I want to thank Senator Pillion. I want to thank Senator McClellan. I want to thank Senator, I always promoted Delegate Knight, Barry Knight, because they have been the wind beneath my wings. All of the years that I worked on this casino legislation, I never had this kind of support. And of course, if you just look at all of the lobbyists who've helped, I won't even ask them to stand because nobody else will be seated. But if we had had this kind of help 24 years ago, just imagine if you will, the kind of money that we would have in the general fund today. And so with that, I would just like to say thank you to each of those persons who've helped me along the way. And I am especially grateful to be standing here today as the peers that I'm on the threshold of finally crossing that hurdle. But let's not lose sight of the important policy decision this body made just last year to help 5 struggling cities facing unique circumstances that could benefit from major economic boost of a destination-style resort or casino. This is a game changer for our local economies. JLOC was clear that these projects will provide thousands of new jobs and millions in additional tax revenue. We can't afford to wait and turn our backs on this historic opportunity. I believe in choice. Let each city choose a project that's the right fit. At the state level, there will be plenty of strong checks and balances in the permitting and regulatory process. Safeguards that give us confidence that these businesses will operate in a way that benefits the Commonwealth and local residents. JLOC cited 3 key criteria for each casino owner and operator. Someone who is 1, qualified, 2, financially stable, and 3, experienced. This is our goal, which my bill accomplishes. Please listen to our local voices. These communities are not asking for a handout from Richmond, simply exist to control their destiny and stand on their own 2 feet. Now with that, I'd like to bring up my wingman who's done a lot of the grinding very nice, and I definitely want Scott Johnson at my right arm. Can we trade places over here?
Thank you, Senator Lucas.
Now-
Delegate Knight, welcome to the upper chamber for a little bit. We'll see you in a few weeks, right? We'll see you next week.
And I'd like very much to turn to Scott first and let Scott kind of get into the weeds of what I think a lot of you want to hear, and also the reason why I think you will be happy to vote for this legislation. Scott.
Mr. Johnson.
Good morning, members of the committee. I'm Scott Johnson. I represent Bristol Regional Casino and Gaming. I want to begin like Senator Lucas did with a thank you. A lot of people behind me in this room have worked a lot of long hours with patrons and all, but one person that really has put in a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears has been Mr. Wade, your staff. We cannot thank him enough. Will try to step through the substitute. I realize that it is 70 pages, but I want to highlight the things that you've asked us about as we go through. First, Mr. Chairman, if you would please turn to page 3. One of the things that's developed as we've gone through this process is a desire to create a Virginia Indigenous Peoples Trust Fund. That would be a fund to benefit those tribes that have been recognized. Some of you may wonder, who are those tribes? Chickahominy Indian Tribe, Chickahominy Indian Tribe Eastern Division, Upper Mattaponi Tribe, Rappahannock Tribe, Monacan Indian Tribe, and Yansman Indian Tribe. So that is created in this bill. Mr. Chairman, if I can take you to page 13. This is the section of the bill that talks about the deliberations of the Lottery Board today. The Freedom of Information Act permits the Lottery Board to conduct business in private, and that is going to be reflected on there as well. Page 14, at the top, line 345, that is basically saying that in the criminal code section, we're saying if you're a valid, legal casino operator, you're not committing a crime in Virginia. Mr. Chairman, on page 15, if I may take you to the top of that page, this is the smoking section. It is very important because if we were silent in this bill and did not address smoking, then the entire casino arguably could be smoking, and nobody wants that. So what this says, for the guests of the casino and the workers of the casino, you can have a designated smoking area. You have to comply with the mandatory ventilation requirements. If you look on line 374, that little reference to 2827, that's code speak for separate walls, separate ventilation to take care of that. Some casinos will have restaurants as a part of them or attached to them. They have to abide by the Clean Indoor Air Act as well. Mr. Chairman, if I may ask you to flip over to page 28, one of the things that our friends from JLARC mentioned is they wanted to make sure that the operators have a thorough background check, and that line 724 basically says to the lottery, you get access to the criminal records exchange so you can check them out and make sure that they're no bad actors. Mr. Chairman, on the bottom of page 35, you're not going to want to hear about the lottery once and the lottery board wants and casinos wants. You want annual ongoing updates and reports. The bottom of 35 will give you that. If I may take you over to page 38, we've got some great people the governor's put on the lottery board, but now with casino gaming, we want to make sure there are no conflict of interest from those who serve. So that's lines 995 to 1,000. And then you have got the powers of the lottery board director are addressed next. I really want to point you to the bottom of 39, line 1032. That basically gives unfettered access 24/7 to the lottery board to have access to casinos, to inspect, investigate. It's not uncommon in some states that the state agency has a permanent office in the casino, but we want to make sure that that's complete access. Top of page 40, paragraph 10, that talks about the penalties, and it goes down to line 1040, where you've got a penalty up to $250,000 if somebody does something bad. Page 41 is the new chapter that we are creating that will establish casino gaming. I would point you to line 1080. We talk about how the taxes are going to be based on the adjusted gross receipts, and that's basically what you take in minus what you pay out, a common approach in other states, but that is there. Our definition of casino gaming is on line 1084. You will also see that later in the bill, because that's the same definition we use for the tax code, but we need to put it in two different places. Taking you over, Mr. Chairman, to line for page 43, in the middle of that page, we have a definition of sports betting that is there, and there will be authority in the bill to say a casino can qualify for a license for sports betting if that's the direction the General Assembly goes. On page 44, this gets into the powers of the lottery board. So we just talked a minute ago about powers of the lottery director. These are board powers. Similar to Senator Reeves' bill a second ago when we talked about a problem gaming fund, we've got two protections in here. On page 45, we've got a voluntary exclusion program, and that is like a no entry list, if you will, that a person can place themselves on, or if the casino operator knows that someone should not be coming in, they can honor that and make sure that that individual does not get into trouble. And we'll talk about a problem gaming fund a little bit later. Mr. Chairman, on page 46, we get into the definition of eligible host cities. Those are the cities where a casino may be. And on page 47, those 5 cities are enumerated there. Line 220 makes reference to the description, and we use descriptions in here for an important reason. As Senator Lucas and the other patrons have said, this is a bill about helping economically depressed cities and creating jobs and economic development. And we thought it important to show the current situation of those cities as opposed to just sticking a city's name in there. So the first paragraph on that page 47 is Portsmouth. Number 2 is Danville. Number 3 is Bristol. Number 4 is Norfolk. And number 5 is the city of Richmond. And with the city of Richmond at the end, when you talk about operators, the 2 potential operators in the city, which the city will determine, will either be the Monkeys or it would be Colonial Downs under the legislation.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, sir.
You're doing a fantastic job moving through. I'm going to invite the committee as we go through different concepts to interact with you as we go. That way we're on the same page as we work through versus jumping back through. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. And I'll pause now if anybody has something.
So is everyone under the understanding of what each of the sections are, A1 through A5? Question for Mr. Johnson is, so we not allowing the locality to select as the other cities have selected?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, on the top, or let's see, bottom of page 47, line 1245, the locality will select between the two entities listed there in the Pamunkeys or Colonial Downs, and that was a product of negotiation. But it's a city of Richmond determination. Right. And Delegate Knight reminded me too, that deals with the potential implication and hurt that may have been felt by the Indians' presence, and also given the footprint that Colonial Downs already has established in the city of Richmond.
Mr. Chairman, before I call up Delegate Knight, I would like to move the substitute and then we can go further and we'll be able to answer the questions.
Is there a motion from the committee on moving the substitute? Motion second, all in favor of the substitute?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, on page 48, we've talked about the local criteria. That's line 1253, paragraph C. That's all the various things.
Sorry, Mr. Johnson.
Oh,
You're doing a great job. The question in terms of, we have 4 localities right now that have essentially local control, but a 5th that does not. We've already predetermined in this proposal through legislation who the 2 winners could be. Can someone help the committee to understand why we have one theory of selection in the bill and then a second theory of selection also embedded that contradicts the other 4?
yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to J.G. on that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, John Garrett Kemper on behalf of the Pamunkey Indian Tribe, and I invite Colonial Downs to join me. There are 2 special issues, one with the tribe. One of the reasons why we're talking about gaming in addition, the main reason is the long existence of Senator Lucas. The second is the only tribe recognized in Virginia as federal gaming rights. There are 2 facilities that are in their historical footprint, Norfolk and Richmond. And you may remember last year, the bill said that the only commercial license that can be issued by the state in those historical footprints would have to be to the Pamunkey. So, given the JLR report, there was some negotiation and discussion about the Pamunkey saying, okay, we'll back off of that, and there'll be a discussion about where those licenses should go, which is a significant concession on the part of the tribe. With regard to Richmond, there was a recognition in the JLR report that there were 2 special cases, right? One was the historical footprint of the federally recognized tribe. 2 was the current investment of Colonial Downs. And so in the compromise, the idea was to recognize those 2 special constituencies in that decision in Richmond. And I invite the folks from Colonial Downs to answer my own. That's essentially
Follow-up question.
Sure.
On page lines 1268 on page 48, A4, is this section not describing the Pamunkey tribe already for location in Norfolk by code?
Yeah,
Recognizing that?
Mr. Chairman, the 1268 to 1272 recognizes in the Norfolk case, again, not a lock like it was last year, that the city of Norfolk, when making this decision, shall look at a preference and give consideration to the tribe. It is not a guarantee.
Okay. Mr. Kemper, has Norfolk selected a preferred partner?
Not under this bill because it hasn't passed yet, but they've entered into a development agreement with the Pamunkey tribe.
Okay, so the city has a preferred partner at this point in time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And it's written into lines 1268 on page 48. To affirm that.
Mr. Chairman, I would submit to you again that 1268 to 1272 does not affirm that and make that a lock. What it says is when the city certifies its choice of a local operator, that it shall give a preference and a substantial look to the tribe. It does not say they have to select the tribe holder. But they are pretty far down the road, as a number of these cities are, on selecting the tribe as their partner. And a lot of that was done because of the value of the community investment, the social justice argument that the tribe has. So what we're trying to do is to respect that in this draft.
There's no argument about that. I think that the question is the implication of the dual locations being written into the code. I think that's one of the policy questions before the committee versus what is before in the normal. I think, any other questions from the committee members?
Yeah.
Senator.
Sure. I think we've got 3 questions. One is between pages 48 selecting a preferred gaming operator.
Senator Edmund, I think we're about to get to Mr. Johnson's section on that.
Okay.
We paused as we went through the A1 through A5 sections.
Okay. Then one other, and I don't know if this is in the future in this bill about the Indian tribe. Does our, I know that if I'm not correct, if I'm not wrong, the Pamunkey tribe is eligible now to open slot machine locations if we wanted to, and wherever they want to in Virginia. And I'm wondering if we have the right, before they get their federal certification for casino gaming, to engage in a compact with them that they would agree to forego their slots operation in exchange for getting their casino to start, or a casino to start.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna call back up JG, because that's a monkey-specific question.
Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Chairman, again, John Garrett, Kemper, on behalf of the Monkey Tribe. The tribe, this is a commercial license bill. This has nothing to do with the federal process. For the federal process, for the Monkey to operate a slot machine, as you characterized it, they would have to have a land in the trust process with the federal government, and they'd have to go an entirely different path. The primary path of the Monkey Tribe in Virginia at this point is this bill.
And Mr. Chairman, just to follow up.
Follow up, Senator Edmund.
In exchange for the primary path for the Pamunkey in Virginia, would they be willing, not willing to guarantee this today, but are they eligible, could they, if they wanted to, tell the Commonwealth that they would not engage in casino gaming, not engage in slot machines if they're granted a license? Is that allowed under federal law, that they can forego one for the other?
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, my understanding is that that you cannot, by state law, limit their federal rights, but I'd like to have that's a question that really needs to be answered by a federal Indian Affairs Council, which I'm happy to get you answer that question after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Senator Bill.
I have a question about, on page 37, membership board appointments. My question is there any, maybe it's in here somewhere, conflict of interest, training and or annual financial disclosures?
Yes, sir, and we've got folks from the lottery board here in the room that can articulate that in detail.
Hi, Kelly G with the Virginia Lottery, just clarifying that our board members currently file disclosure statements, as do all of our leadership team members with the FOIA statement of economic interest.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Bill.
I see on lines 996 where it says they cannot have any direct or indirect financial, and also it says other good protections there. Frankly, I'd feel more comfortable if they had to file the same disclosures that General Assembly and other state officers have to file, and also that we clarify the training, because I think the ethics training would be beneficial to help prevent problems in advance. But those I think are fairly friendly changes there.
Mr. Chairman, shall I resume?
Proceed.
So let me go back to page 48. And if I can, Mr. Chairman, let me just level set so you can understand the structure of this bill maximizes local choice. So we're getting ready to talk about a process where the locality certifies this is who we want as our operator and goes through criteria that we'll talk about. Then it goes to the lottery board for a pre-certification process. That in essence is the first look at finances and legitimacy. Okay. Then it goes back to the locality for the referendum, and we'll talk about that. Then it comes back to the lottery board for a full-blown look at the license. So just keep in mind that we are really trying to protect local choice, but build in safeguards, and that's where I'm headed down that road.
Mr. Chairman, I beg your
Senator
pardon,
Manchin.
but as you're going through that, if we're giving preference to local control, which I'm good with, please emphasize what we're doing at the state level to give a rigorous and thorough review. And I think, and by the way, back to the chairman's point about Richmond, I feel like the other four are well down a path with a partner, with someone that they believe. I don't get the sense that that's so much the case in Richmond. I know that's the second question, but when you're going through this, would you please really go go through the state step, back to local, and then the state step, and how thoroughly we're going to review the state Department of Environmental Health.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Will do. So, Mr. Chairman, if we can go to.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Laura Bateman on behalf of the city of Richmond, and the city of Richmond fully endorses local choice in the bill as written.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, on page 48, line 1253, this starts with the local criteria. And the thing that you want to remember as these host cities start their local criteria process, they can phone a friend, they have a lifeline to the lottery board to ask for any expertise along the way. But if you look at 1253 through 1267, these are the things the eligible host city shall consider, and all of the various points there. Mr. Chairman, one thing that you emphasized yesterday that's been included in this bill is on line 1267, making sure the locality's got to ask itself, is this in the best interest of our city in that process? So once the locality makes that determination, selects the operator, then on the top of page 49, that is going to be submitted to the lottery board, and the lottery board has got to consider not only the recommendation but the backup documentation. And Mr. Chairman, on line 275, one of your good suggestions was making sure the locality sends up to the lottery board electronically or in writing all the surrounding documentations, any memorandum of understanding with fire and police or any infrastructure or any land purchase agreements. So the lottery board has got as much as they can at that stage to review from that point in time. Mr. Chairman, Senator Mason, on line 1280, one of the things Mr. Chairman asked too yesterday is to make sure the lottery board on its first look considers, is this proposal from the host city in the best financial interest of the Commonwealth? So we got the host city looked at it by their financial interest, now we got the lottery board looking at it as we go on that first. Now, the lottery board will have 45 days to pre-certify the name of the operator that was sent out. So, the next question will come in this bill structure.
Mr. Johnson, since we have lottery board, does lottery board have any comment on 45-day review?
No.
Not at this time? Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, the way the bill is structured, it next goes to licensure, but operationally, if we're going to talk about a referendum, that would actually happen next. But the way the bill is structured is, how do you get a license? Page 48. You have to first be an operator that is committed to $250,000 in casino gaming in the establishment. And that's on line 291, and that includes the building and the million. That's a Freudian slip. 250 million in the infrastructure, including real estate there. Line 1297, you have to pay a $1 million fee for the license as we go into that. Your application process.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Lines 292 include land value. You want to explain that? Last year's substitute before the body excluded land value. This is now including land value.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. One version last year had 200 million excluding land. There was at one point a version that had 250 million, I think, that included land. In talking with the host cities that are described in this bill, it was derived to go with 250 million including land. Okay. And equipment. So, Mr. Chairman, if we go over to page 50, you're now ready for a license. You have to apply for it, and the eligible host city is going to be asked by the lottery board to, within 30 days, send up the certification to them. You look on page 51, line 1342, that applicant has got to pay a $50,000 non-refundable application fee, and if that applicant drags his or her feet and does not provide what the lottery asks for, they will have to pay any reasonable cost above that. So the cost of the license is $1 million, $50,000 application fee. On the bottom of page 51, Mr. Chairman, line 1348, this is a check that if any host city selects one of the authorized Indian tribes, they have got to make sure that we're complying with federal law and to have a federal law review on the bottom of 51 to make sure we're compliant with that.
Mr. Johnson, so essentially, any contract in regards to this section would have to comply with the federal gaming framework.
Any license application would. That's reviewed.
Can you jump back to lines 1305 through 1309? describe the infusion of A5, Richmond section, including state's participation up front.
Now, can you repeat that?
Lines 1305 and 1309 include provision which essentially have the state assisting with the selection process up front, which is different from the other A1 through A4 sections. Is that correct?
That is expressly enumerated there, yes, sir, but in the local criteria piece, it is envisioned that the lottery board would provide resources the city needed or didn't have. But in this particular instance, it's specific. Yeah.
Thank you.
The next thing, Mr. Chairman, on page 52, someone had asked along the way about land use ordinances and making sure these comply with that. If you look at page line 1370, that's addressed there. Mr. Chairman, on page 54, I wanted to draw your attention to 1408, where we've given the lottery board the authority to issue a temporary gaming permit. So if a facility, for example, already had a structure built and wanted to build an additional one, they could issue a one-year temporary gaming permit.
Mr. Johnson, how would that work with a temporary issued permit if the local referendum is specified to a specific address?
It would have to be a temporary permit at that address on that property. So if your property is 100 Jones Road, it's got to be at Jones Road. It can't be somewhere else. Mr. Chairman, the next thing on page 54 is the duration of the operator's license. On line 14, 15, it is 10 years license. Each year it's got to be reviewed, and one of the things that I know is very important to Delegate Knight is line 14, 18, and 14, 19. Basically saying you've got a 10-year license, but the host city is going to have to acknowledge each year that that operator is in compliance with all your local ordinances and regs. And if they're not, they need to submit a compliance plan or ask for a variance or address it. That's basically a safeguard because you don't want a bad actor that's not doing what they're supposed to, building code wise or trash removal or fire or whatever. So that's an ongoing safeguard that Delegate Knight was helpful with. Page 55, supplier permits. This is what the code speaks for. The people that put the machines in a casino have to be regulated and have a license as well. And there's a process for giving them a license, holding them accountable, denying a permit if they are not doing appropriate, or suspending a permit. If you go to page 58, this is a service permit. So what we just talked about was a supplier permit. A service permit are the people doing concessions. They too have to make sure that they are licensed and appropriate and go through their and the deal. Yeah. Now, Mr. Chairman, if I can take you to page 60, this is the codification of best practices of casino gaming that runs from page 60 over to the top of page 61. Now, bottom of line 61 is a local referendum, and not to repeat myself, but remember we said the locality's gonna certify, lottery board's gonna pre-certify, then it's gonna go back for a local referendum, and you're gonna come back and get a license. So this is sort of step 3 in that process. And the local referendum has got to occur. A lottery board's not permitted to grant a license without it. It's very unique, and why we set it up this way, on the referendum will be the name of the operator and the location. So everybody in the city is going to be voting on, yeah, I want a casino, yeah, I want XYZ to operate it, yeah, I want it at 102 Maple Street. And that's why we have got that process. And the language from line 1623 through 1642, we wanted to make sure the same referendum language was consistent throughout. And that is in code as a template to do that.
Mr. Johnson, quick question in regards to the sequence for Richmond, for instance. You have to get a referendum on the ballot. You have to, as I understand, the city council has indicated a competitive RFP process. So between now and the latest date for a referendum is locking in, because also later on, it's this year, November 3rd. Line 1628 and location, is this locking in Richmond to essentially make a decision before the last date available to get a referendum on the ballot? I mean, you've got a very narrow window by having the words and location in this bill. Can you speak to that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The first thing you mentioned on line 18 and 15 at the very end of the bill, the referendum is called for on the date of the general election, November the 3rd. Okay, and you are correct with name and location. If Ms. Bateman wants to come back up from Richmond, I want to comment on that piece from Richmond. Let her do. Can you repeat the question, Mr. Chairman?
So lines 1628 have state the gaming establishment and location. You're about to venture into a process over the next 4.5 months, is my guess based on the timing, to get a court, to get a referendum on, to go through a competitive selection process as conceived under this bill, and publish the name and location of said competitive process.
Yes, the council did endorse and with full understanding the referendum requirement and the tight timeline.
Okay, so follow to that is, and location is boxing you in versus publishing this as a referendum. I think JLR earlier sort of indicated you could have a referendum that says, shall a casino be operated? This is locking you in your time frame.
Yeah, I don't have a.
Because you have to theoretically pick an address with that court request.
Understand, and, I know this, I know that the council has endorsed as much local choice and flexibility as possible. I understand the point you're making. I don't have an answer for you on that, but we'll get with the city, we'll get back to you.
There's no more time on this, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, so
Senator
but
Mason.
it doesn't speak to this year, right?
Yes, it does.
It speaks to this year?
Later on in the enactment process, you have an enactment that requires the referendum be November 3rd of 2020. That's on line 1815.
So, I mean, should we think about that? I mean,
It would be a friendly amendment to delete and location.
and I don't mean think about that for every location, but I mean, why are we driving Richmond to do it now? I mean, if you're ready in Portsmouth, let's roll. Let's get the referendum
I've been
on.
ready 24 years.
I understand that. let me tell you, this man didn't stand in the way, man. But if we're not ready in another location, I don't know why we forced him into what seems to be an unbelievably tight timeline.
I've been waiting a long time. That's a friendly amendment. I accept that.
So, Mr. Johnson, would the amendment be to delete and location
On line
on line
6,
1628?
yes, sir. That would include, located.
Okay, so line amendment to strike and location, 1628.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps one of the things too, some jurisdictions want to have a location in there for their local folks, and maybe perhaps make location permissive as opposed to just remove it from the bill, because the locality wants to have it. I mean, I can see, you think your citizens, your neighbors, they don't wanna know if it's next door or block down the street, so if you make it permissive, that may be a way to go.
I like location. And Mr. Chairman, I'm not trying to amend on the spot. I'm just listening and trying to see what we can adjust.
And Mr. Chairman, if you did that on 1628, you could say city and may include a location.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Chairman,
Committee want to adopt that line amendment? Okay. All right, is there a motion?
I move to.
Is there a second? All right, there's a motion and a second to adopt the line amendment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. 1 minute. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
okay, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right with you, we're on the bottom of 62 and up top of 63, and this is the taxation. I can best describe it to you is you've got 2 buckets, and in each bucket we got 3 tiers. And the taxation is based on the capital investment. So bucket 1 is 250 million to 350 million, and bucket 2 is over 350 million. So within bucket 1, 250 to 350 million, there are 3 tiers. And the tiers are broken at various levels with 3 tax rates, 15%, 20%, and 28%. And the second bucket, if the capital investment has exceeded $350 million, we keep those same tax rates but make adjustments to the tier amounts. And that is how that is structured. So the money goes or needs to go into a gambling proceeds fund, and that fund is on the bottom of page 63. And the funds are collected within the close of the following business day. day, so it's not a lag where the casinos would be a month late or some period of time. It's real prompt payment. So once you have the monies in that fund, the General Assembly will decide what to do with the state portion of it, but on page 64, we have outlaid a local payment out of that fund back to the various host cities. Those payments are either 5%, 6%, or 7%, and those percentages go up where the locality gets more money if there is more of the investment that is coming in there. So the local payout goes up in tiers through this process. One other thing to point out in the payment of that is on line 1688, for any casino that is operated by one of the Indian tribes, 1% of that casino's gross receipts will go to the fund, the Virginia Indian Tribe Fund that was created earlier in the bill. Okay, and that will benefit those 6 tribes that I laid out. And then, Mr. Chairman, on 1695, 1% of the money in this fund goes to the problem gaming support fund that's established in this bill at the Department of Behavioral Health. So we got 2 protections for problem gambling. We've got a benevolence fund form, and we've got a voluntarily do not enter list. Mr. Chairman, the balance of the bill has got some prohibited acts. One thing that's important on the top of 67 is a prohibition on anybody coming into a casino or placing a bet if you're under age 21, and that's on line 1755. And on 1757, a prohibition on betting on youth gaming. Mr. Chairman, I was going to take you next to page 68 and point out some of the things in the enactment clause. On line 1799, the folks in Bristol have worked together collaboratively with the local jurisdictions to create a regional improvement commission. So that portion of the funds that go back to that locality will be shared by a number of counties. And just in case you're interested, it's Lee, Scott, Wise, Dickinson, Russell, Buchanan, Washington, Smith, Wythe, Grayson, Tazewell, and Bland. So that is the Regional Improvement Commission there. Mr. Chairman, the next enactment number 4 on 1812 deals with when the referendum will take place. And the 5th enactment deals with colonial downs regarding some additional machines that could be qualified for and some limitations on where they could be located. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to answer any questions or dive deeper on anything you want me to.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That's very thorough. Appreciate your work on it. Amigo, from the previous amendment, can we take a look at the enactment clause maybe to deal with the Richmond issue and not tweak the referendum language as we did on
Yes,
1628?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, what we could do is go to that enactment clause and maybe carve out Richmond so that it would basically say that the other 4 localities would have to have the referendum by that date, but that Richmond would not. And I think the problem is that it has to appear is that the referendum
Precisely.
has to be precise.
Okay, we accept that amendment.
We'll prepare that for full committee then to make sure that we don't create any conflicts within the code section.
Thank you.
Senator Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern had been, what if a locality is not ready for their referendum? You know, they don't have enough of the details together, they haven't gotten their project completed in time.
Mr. Chairman, they would not be able to go forward. If they can't meet the deadline in this bill, then they would have to come back to the General Assembly. Y'all would have to consider legislation going forward.
Senator Higgins.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question. Is the initial funding for the projects already in place? So once they're approved, where is the funding for the actual building coming from?
Mr. Chairman, there is no state funding in this proposal. There is no local funding in the proposal. All of the funding is with the operators, and so they will put the money in.
Mr. Johnson, maybe you can illustrate the initial $50,000 filing fee has essentially some sufficient language. Should there be additional fees for initial reviews,
Right.
Those fees will be charged to the applicant. So this baseline $50,000 fee, and if the lottery board identifies there's additional funds needed, they will be requested of the applicant.
And Mr. Chairman, to add to that, at that application, you have got to say, I'm in for $250 million from the get-go. So there's skin in the game before we even apply.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Mason.
Mr. Johnson, could you so localities picked a partner, come to lottery, outline the things you talked about. We've gone back to the locality, we've had a referendum, approved. Can you take me back to the spot that when we come back to the state for that second pass, can you just walk me through the thorough review and the intricacy involved with how are we spelling it out here? Once it's been approved, next stop is go.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So you've left the locality after a favorable referendum. You come to the lottery board. The lottery board is gonna call on the city and they have 30 days to say we certify XYZ operator. The $50,000 application fee is paid. It is addressed on page 49, line 1285, where you talk about the need for a license, but more detailed. If you flip to page 50, it goes through on 50 and 51, all of the various detailed things the lottery board has got to look and verify regarding the operator, the good conduct and background of the operator, the project itself. Line 1331 is one very important to me. It says the financial responsibility. And I think our friends at JLARC articulated that that is a key thing, making sure that it is a solid operator.
Senator Boyce,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Johnson, can you go back over again how we came to the tax structure that's being proposed in this? Just other states, can you just give us a little bit more of a review over that, please?
We started out, this was something trying to help economically depressed cities, trying to realize that if your tax structure is too high, you're gonna disincentivize capital investment. And we're trying to get jobs back there and have the investment. That was the trade-off. The percentages in the bill are a product of the patrons. I'm certainly glad for them to speak to that point of it. I was just a messenger on that piece.
I want Delegate Knight to use your numbers.
We set up the tier, yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We set up the tier system on this. We knew this was for economically depressed. We know that the state's gonna make some money on it. It's more about creating jobs and the economic vitality, because that's where the eligible host cities are described. We don't say Portsmouth, we say a place that has had a poverty rate of a particular amount, and more than 40% of their land is non-taxable because it's typically federal land. So when we go in this 15% rate for a 250 to 350 minimum capital investment in there, we run 15% up to $150 million. But if they make over a $350 million investment, then that tier goes to $200 million. So we're trying to incentivize these casinos to create more jobs, more economic vitality, because we view this not just as a casino, but as an entertainment venue.
That's right.
Mr. Johnson, can you go back over lines 1816 through 1828 roughly on page 69?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
A little bit more detail about that, please, about why we have HHR being infused into the casino language.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So if you'll recall today from legislation that you passed, there are a certain number of machines for the historical horse racing, and the locations of those machines have largely been determined by population tiers. You have a certain population in order to have a machine. What is addressed in here, and the reason it is addressed, is if a casino goes into a jurisdiction of the city where there is already presence of historical horse racing, the historical horse racing folks in the room will tell you that they've already made some aspect of capital investment, have economic investment, and that this was an effort to try to make sure the two could coexist and strike some balance. So in this fifth enactment clause, Mr. Chairman, for every referendum that is granted or approved by a locality, say city A, then there will be the ability for there to be 600 additional historical horse racing machines. Now, we've got 5 potential referendums in here, but the total number of new machines under this legislation on line 1819 is capped at 2,500 statewide. The next aspect of this enactment clause on line 1824 is instead of looking only at population numbers, they looked at metropolitan areas to permit addressing additional machines. But at the same time, you don't want to have new machines going in within 35 miles of a casino, and that is on line 1827. And you wanted to also make sure you didn't have any type of new satellite facility down in the southwestern part of Virginia as part of the Regional Improvement Commission.
So follow Mr. Johnson, can you describe on lines 1825, what is a metropolitan area with a population in excess of 2.5 million?
Mr.
That's
Chairman.
being proposed to add 1,800 machines.
I believe that would be in the Dumfries area, as I'm told.
Okay, so that's in Northern Virginia for 1,800, and size comparatively, the facility from Rosie's that is approximately 2 miles to the southwest of here is how many machines?
I need to phone a friend on that.
The maximum before on the other bill was 3,000 total machines, no more than 700 location. This is now, per this legislation, is a cap as many as 2,500. We're allowing 1,800 up in the Northern Virginia area.
I think there's a
700.
700. So the answer is 700. So the
Machines at Rosie's in South.
Alright, so the former Super Kmart facility or whatever the box was holds 700 machines right now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is proposing roughly 3 Super Kmart's size and equivalency.
It would, basically in that one metropolitan area that fits that.
In Dumfries.
In Dumfries, right, it would be 500 machines.
So it's a super size slot machine in Northern Virginia.
Right. Yeah, line 1824 should authorize up to 1,800 machines in a satellite facility in the metropolitan area with a population in excess of 2.5 million and 500 machines in a metropolitan population area with excess of 3,000.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Boyce goes and Senator Dutton.
is there a provision that the locality would have a referendum to allow that as well?
Yes, yes, that's the current law.
Yeah, and Dumfries had approved that referendum, not necessarily to the size or scale, but to the concept. Senator Dutton.
Mr. Mike, the question on this would be the historical horse racing that we're talking about here is 12% tax rate, correct?
This bill does not change that tax rate with historical horse racing.
But it would be continued at 12%?
Right, there's nothing in this bill to change that, right?
And the minimum on the casino gambling is 15%?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chairman, I would just comment on that. I think we might want to look at that because with this kind of an expansion, I would almost want some sort of connection to the number of actual days of racing and closing downs. I do that.
Mr. Chairman, I will suggest to the committee that we do have a tax expert here. If you have any tax questions as to policy or what we've done in other states, if you would like to hear from Corey Morowitz, I'm glad to call him up.
Senator Dutton, I believe these are going to be interesting incentivizing some preparations. Is this, if the vehicle needs for, to start to look at a number of different variables involved in this? Follow-up questions? From the committee? All right, we're going to circle back to a couple things and take, start with you, Senator Lucas, some opposition to the bill first, and we'll circle back and support. Those in opposition to Senate Bill 36?
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Agag with the Family Foundation, and we obviously can kind of see where this is going. But I think it would be a disservice not to at least offer some comments on this before we move forward. Because with our deep concern for families and for the most disadvantaged Virginians, that we implore you to reject any and all attempts to expand gambling in Virginia and bring more exploitative gaming to the state. No doubt lawmakers are attracted by the allure of expanding gaming and all the potential for more revenue to fill the coffers and fund government programs. And while there will be a revenue gain, of course, as the JLARC report showed, history proves that the costs will far outweigh the financial gains for Virginia. Virginia has long had a respect for individual liberty, but the government should never use that as a means to establish massive programs to profit off of some of the poorest Virginians. It's worth addressing the misconceptions about the nature of gambling. It's not what TV or movies portray. It's not these young professionals out there having a fun night, using disposable income. That's not reality. Casinos and those off-site betting establishments and the lottery attract people from some of the poorest communities who spend countless hours spending their savings or food money in hopes of hitting the jackpot, something that they virtually have no chance of doing. And these are the people the gaming industry targets. And studies show that pathological and problem gamblers double when they live within 10 miles of a casino. Nationally, 40 to 60% of casino revenues and other gambling revenues are derived from problem gamblers. And how about this? Americans are losing $224,505 per minute to commercialized gambling. Why is this critically problematic? Because 47% of problem gamblers are likely to have a divorce compared to 25% of non-gamblers. 63% of pathological gamblers have suicidal thoughts or attempts of suicide. And 3 out of 5 problem gamblers use criminal activity to fund their addiction. So while people are becoming more problem gamblers, facing financial ruin, and trying to keep their lives intact, the state increases its revenues and the giant gambling industry gets their profits. It's nothing more than reverse Robin Hood, taking from the poor to give to the rich. Casinos and off-site betting places also are a house for criminal and deviant behavior. Rosie's had 50 police calls to their New Kent operation within the first few months of operation, and then also within the first 10 days, the police were called 12 times to their Richmond establishment. And they're not even supposedly considered a casino. Bristol and Richmond, 2 places slated for a casino if referendums are passed, are within 2 major human trafficking thoroughfares, I-81 and I-95. Casinos will make that worse. Of course, the greatest concern is for our youth. Sports betting and casinos are designed to lure the youth and appeal to their curiosity. As a result, we are experiencing a significant rise in gambling among today's youth. I know my comments are repetitive. I shared them last year. I've shared them in other committees. I'm doing it again. I will likely do it again this afternoon. And the reason is because the outcomes happen over and over again all over the country. It's the same story. The legislature approves various types of gambling. They don't achieve the desired revenue, so under the umbrella that's too big to fail, the state helps to bail them out. It happened with horse racing and pari-mutuel wagering. It's happening now with the lottery and expanding it to include online sales. And that's exactly what will happen with casinos and sports betting and everything else. Look no further than Atlantic City or New York. Casinos in both states promised large payouts for themselves and the state, and the states bought into it. And when the money shut down, they went running back to the legislature for more tax incentives to fund their exploitative businesses. If you want to help economically distressed localities, find other ways, but don't bring more gambling to Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know our time is short. Eddie Ayla, Virginia City Independent Baptist. We agree with the comments and very concerned about where this is going.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Senators. My name is Oludare Ogunde. I'm president of a non-profit organization here in the city of Richmond. But before I start what I'm about to say, I want us to understand the significance of this month of February. That this is African American History Month, Black History Month, as we said. My people in this country have been made a permanent underclass. And this bill, for one reason, is taking a whole industry and assigning it to 2 companies, the Monkeys and Colonial Diamonds. Where is the piece of the pie for black investors in this bill? You don't think we have $500 million to build a casino? I mean, we know we're a permanent underclass, but you don't think we have money to build our own casino? Is it only investment for Monkeys and for Colonial Downs? Let's think about this for a minute. I was born in Nigeria, where you have a lot of corrupt leaders and politicians. They make laws just for their friends. Just for their friends. This is America. The Commonwealth of Virginia. We should never make a law, of any law, to benefit just 2 people or 2 entities. In the city of Richmond, we about 50% of the population here is African American. You want us to pick between Colonial Downs and for Monkey Tribe. You will not find a single thing in the policies for Monkey Tribe that benefits black people in this country. That they come in here to our community and give us money to help with our schools. So I urge you today, because even if you pass this bill, I'm going to be seated right there in front of the governor's mansion to make sure that he does not sign this bill. It is wrong. Black people deserve a piece of the pie. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments.
Mr. Chairman, move to strike enactment clause number 5.
There's a motion to strike enactment clause 5 on page 69. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. Senator Bell?
Mr. Chairman, and I know Senator Evan has a question on this as well, minority employment. I wanted to see where we've addressed that and ask if you could shed some light on that and make sure that is covered.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, sir, and if I may, Mr. Chairman, was coming up to answer Delhi Bill's question. You remember you asked a while back if the lottery board members take the same, do the same financial economic disclosures that members of the General Assembly do, and take that same training, and it was just confirmed to me that they do. So I just wanted to pass that back to you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Johnson, can you address the majority, because that is I think a question Senator Evan and several of us have, that we had seen drafts that had in various form of minority participation. I don't know that this bill has that, based on what has been structured. Can you speak to that?
Mr. Chairman, I am not aware on this particular second that there is anything in here regarding that. I mean, obviously these areas want to help all low-income people of all color, and certainly need the workforce to thrive.
Senator Evan?
Yeah, it's not necessarily limited to low income. I'd like to see first minority investment or ownership of the casino percentage, and then secondly, in the construction end as well, SWAM business a percentage. So I don't know I don't have an amendment prepared on that, and I don't know if this is going to finance, if that could be prepared in time for that.
We can certainly work with Amigo and all of this spare time to figure out.
And I've got one more.
May I answer that, Mr. Chairman? Senator Evan, remember when the developer goes to the locality and the locality goes through all the various things they want. If the locality wants those points addressed, that can be in the development agreement. That is part of the process of that operator being certified and sent out. That's not in the bill per se, but that is obviously a local option, local right that is there.
And Mr. Chairman, I would just follow up. Can that be a state requirement that for any gaming operator in Virginia that there would be minority ownership or participation?
Mr. Chairman, I would say I think you were speaking to Mr. Wade about drafting language that could accomplish that, and certainly that would be something that we will talk with you on as the process goes further.
And Mr. Chairman, I have one amendment.
Senator Evan?
One more written out amendment. It's a little bit lengthy. I don't know if you want me to give it to Mr. Wade to read, or if you want me to read it.
Can you go ahead and cite what the amendment is proposed to the subcommittee?
Summarize or read it? Which you prefer? Summarize. Okay. That the operator would be required to pay the local prevailing wage as determined by Davis Bacon, each laborer, workman, mechanic on the site. That they would have some apprenticeship programs. If they provide health insurance, require those same kind of things from the subcontractors. And this is part what I was getting at, this in the construction. Establish preferences for hiring residents in the local city and adjacent localities, veterans, women, and minorities, et cetera. That's the gist of it.
Senator Evan, I'd suggest that you take that up in full committee. We've got an overarching policy versus introducing new policy elements into this bill. If that'd be okay.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Evan and I have been talking about this for a couple of years now. of course, I accept that, I think that's a good recommendation. And so I'm agreeable to that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a quick comment.
Senator Bell.
I agree with where we're going with this. I mean, I think we have to look carefully at temporary workers versus permanent workers, because it can be very complicated. And we want to overcomplicate that issue. And the other one, I think it's important to point out, with the monkeys, we do have a minority ownership. And I think we have minority employment there. I mean, we could certainly try to spell that out, but there is minority ownership. So there's been people who implied there isn't. And I think that's kind of a false argument.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Lucas.
and if I might, on page 69, the rationale for the stricken language, this was all a part of the negotiation, and I see this as a poison pill, because all of these entities have been working together to get us to this point. And so, of course, I object to having the language stricken, but I like to
Senator
hear
Lucas,
rationale
this
for it.
goes well beyond the 5 localities involved. This now involves statewide implications of level 2, essentially casino operations. This is a huge departure from the original bill, and I think the committee has its concerns that it's now establishing almost a 2,000 slot machine in Northern Virginia versus the regs right now, which provide for about 150. So this is a fairly significant, we're already dealing with significant policy issues as it is. This one involves now statewide implications. All those in support of the bill as amended? Localities, if you want to say who you are and where you're from and support, that'd be great.
My name is Alfred Liggins. I'm the CEO of Urban One Incorporated. We're the largest African-American owned targeted media company in the country. We're a public company that also has many hundreds of Virginia shareholders, founded by a black woman, my mother, Cat Hughes. We also operate radio stations since 1997 here in Richmond, Virginia, and also in Northern Virginia. We're also a licensed gaming operator and owner in the state of Maryland. We're partners with MGM National Harbor, and we're in support of this bill. However, we are very interested in the conversation about minority ownership, inclusion, hard targets on hiring, construction, contracting, service contracting. You talk about indigenous populations. African Americans are more than 50% of many of these cities that are being considered. And yes, these cities and locales are in distress, but you can't actually improve the lives of African Americans without economic inclusion and opportunity. I agree with your point about the city of Richmond being able to have the same kind of latitude and choice that the other locales have, because based on my conversations, they would probably write in minority participation, minority ownership. But as stated, they only have 2 options. And we implore the committee to think about the African American population as we approach the 400-year anniversary of enslaved Africans arriving at Fort Comfort, Virginia. We're a company that stands ready to actually, to the gentleman's point earlier, we can fully support a $250 or $350 million casino project. Our company, our minority-owned, black-owned, women-owned company, it's not a handout, it's not a set-aside. We want the ability to participate and respect. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Mason.
as the localities come up, since we addressed the referendum conversation and timing of Richmond, you just make sure you verify that you're good to go with the timeline of the referendum.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm John Rowe, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth. And I'm here to tell you that we're satisfied with the timeline, but most importantly, the Portsmouth City Council is 100% behind this legislation. And to talk about the economic consequence and the benefits of this bill, we have with us, and it's my pleasure, my honor to introduce our Director of Economic Development, the best in the state, Robert Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Chairman, committee members. For our locality, the City of Portsmouth, this comes down to 2 words: economic development. In a city where over 50% of the land is non-taxable, and where the unemployment rate is 3.5%, compared compared to a record low in the state of 2.6%. A project of this magnitude provides not only the necessary injection of tax revenue, but more importantly provides an opportunity for us to enhance the quality of life for both the underemployed and the unemployed in our locality. And that's by providing 1,300 jobs with an average salary of almost $50,000 for these individuals. Now, we've stated since the inception of this process, we have the site, we have the partner, you all have the legislation backed by the JLARC study and JLARC research. We're simply asking for the opportunity to allow our citizens to make that choice to allow casino gaming in our locality. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that a well-known senior senator stated last year, and the same holds true today, this is Portsmouth's Amazon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. If we can, Chief, come on up, and we've got about 3 minutes if we can work through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief.
Chairman, members of the subcommittee, my name is Robert Gray. I'm chief of the Monkey Tribe. I'm here because this issue is very important to our tribe. Our story in Virginia dates back more than 10,000 years. We were Virginians before the colony Virginia even came to be. We've endured hardships, natural and man-made, that have threatened our very existence. As the only Indian tribe in Virginia with the federal right to have gaming, we're pleased to be here to support the substitute bill, which is the product of years of working together with economically distressed communities in Virginia to seek the same self-reliance that we do. While we have had to make concessions to make this compromise, we believe this bill adequately protects our tribal rights, and it's good not just for us, but for all federally recognized tribes in Virginia. When thinking about this legislation, we need to reflect on how this gaming discussion even began in the Commonwealth. The 5 cities, along with our tribe, began this journey because each of us had a compelling case for economic need. This bill was born of economic necessity, not a rush to garner more profit for those already fortunate. The gaming revenue we are discussing will lift our members out of poverty, not of their making, provide vital access to health care and education, and after many years, give us freedom from dependency on the meager federal funds we currently receive. Equally important, we will be reinvesting in the Virginia communities in which we'll be operating. New jobs, job training, and other direct investments. We will keep this revenue in Virginia, for Virginians, and for Virginia communities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing the needs of our tribe and the needs of the other distressed localities in this bill. This bill provides a meaningful way for all of us to achieve our goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Mindy Carlin, and I'm here on behalf of the City of Norfolk. Thank you to our patrons. We are very much supportive of an affirmative vote to move this legislation forward, and are firmly committed to our partnership with the tribe. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Randy Eads, City Manager and the City Attorney for the City of Bristol, Virginia. First, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize everyone from the City of Bristol who came up here today to support this bill. I could have these things for a moment. So,
thank you for making the trip and joining us today.
that's a long trip, as most of you all know, so it is a big time for them to come up here. What I do want to say in regards to this is I do understand there's opposition in regards to this bill, but we have to go back to the purpose of this bill, and the purpose of this bill was simply for economic development purposes. It looks at poverty rate, unemployment rate, and population decline, and Bristol is ridden with all 3 of them. Our poverty rate in Bristol is 20.6% compared to statewide average of 10.6%. 3,324 residents are in poverty. 7,375 residents receive SNAP, TANF, or Medicaid benefits on a monthly basis in our city. That's 45% of my residents receive some sort of benefit from the government. 75% of my children are free and reduced lunch, which qualifies every child to get free and reduced lunch because so many are on free and reduced lunch. Our population has declined since 2010 by 5.4%, and I expect when the next census comes out, it's going to decline even further. And when we talk about a sports book and how it affects young people, what affects young people is not having jobs. We do not have jobs in Bristol. We don't have jobs in Southwest Virginia, and it's time to change that. And I'm going to echo the sentiments of the people from Portsmouth. This is our Amazon. When you look at the number of jobs lost in Southwest Virginia, and specifically Bristol, over the past 4 years, 1,010 jobs have been lost. And if you look at the JLARC study, we would receive 1,067 jobs with this development. 418 jobs of indirect jobs, that's 1,400 jobs, takes up for that almost immediately. That's something that's unheard of. I don't have Amazon, GM, Facebook, Google calling my phone or knocking on my door. I do have developers that understand the needs of Southwest Virginia and the opportunity for Southwest Virginians to have a job and a decent living, and this is our opportunity to do that. So I respect your all's decision, I respect the conversation you've had here today, but this is something that's sorely needed. I understand the benefits can be great, and also I understand there are consequences, but we do have things in place to deal with that, so thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your continued advocacy over the years.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ken Larkin. I'm the city manager of Danville, Virginia. I appreciate the opportunity to speak very briefly to you. I am here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 36, and I'm speaking on behalf of our mayor and city council members who are all unanimously in favor of this. And with me here today are Councilman Dr. Gary Miller and Councilman Sherman Saunders, who are right behind me. Okay, great. Danville has appreciated the collaborative spirit in this bill with Colonial Downs and the Pamunkey Tribe and the host localities, and we are in agreement with them on the contents of the bill. Our top priority is that Danville voters have an opportunity to vote on this issue. Danville is taking this process seriously, so that if our community has the opportunity to vote and they vote in the affirmative, we are ready to implement it in the best way possible. We have spent countless hours studying the issue by visiting resort casinos in other states, studying the issue, and meeting with potential operators. We also hired outside expertise to study the impact on our community and to guide us through the process.